most remarkable thing about these trips is how amazingly the group really gels after a couple of days. And like, that's something that I think everybody, takes away that they don't really expect to, is how much they appreciate being in that group and getting to know each other in that environment, because it becomes a very tight-knit little community group for 5 days.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jessica, Executive Director of Wild Cumberland, and we appreciate you being here. We like to use these special podcast episodes to dig a little deeper into topics that are related to the seashore and, most importantly, its wilderness. So today we are honored to do just that with Tal Galton from Snakeroot Ecotours. And Snakeroot, Devin, let's tell them all about it.
Snakeroot Ecotours is based out of Celo, North Carolina. It's nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Tal and his team of guides search for the best wildflower coves, conduct rare firefly tours, hunt for rare orchids, and more. They offer custom full-day outings, overnights, nature retreats, and youth programs, and much more. Their mantra is, "We help you see the magical world we live in."
In April, Tal led a group of folks on a 5-day guided wilderness experience on Cumberland Island. So we're going to talk about that and other parts of Snakeroot's guided wilderness adventures today. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we can't wait to hear all about your recent experience on Cumberland Island specifically. But first, I'd love to give our listeners a little background. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about how you personally discovered Cumberland.
So the first time I went was just as a day trip. So just, the typical sort of like hiking around Dungeness Sea Camp on the beach and the southern little section of the island. Just got a little taste of it, but it was enough of a taste to see that, there was just miles and miles of beach and maritime forest that had very few people in it, and a place that I really wanted to go back. So the other times I've been back have been as multi-day trips, spent a couple nights at Sea Camp, but mostly up at Stafford and Brick Hill and Yankee Paradise, all those backcountry sites.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. So did it take you 10 years to get back to it, or?
It did. Yeah. And so the next time I went back, actually, I was leading a student group with Arthur Morgan School, which is a school I worked for a long time right up here in the mountains of North Carolina. And we do these really cool trips, outdoor trips with the school. And so it was on one of those trips, and we, took a bunch of kids onto the island for a few days and, let them experience it too. So.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. And we'll get a little bit more into that a little later on the podcast as far as the school and everything like that. Can you tell us a little bit about just like your background and kind of what got you into the wilderness space and, what caused you to go on these ecotours or lead these ecotours?
Yeah. So, I've been into this kind of thing since childhood, but really got a chance to do more, sort of wilderness type stuff in high school. I had a couple of jobs actually working with the Youth Conservation Corps out in Yosemite National Park, and then Student Conservation Association while I was in college. I know they have interns that do the turtle research on the island, I believe, still. And I remember seeing that listed when I was like poring over their catalog, back when I was in college. But I ended up going to a state park in South Dakota, in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and spending the summer there. And so I caught that bug early, like as far as spending days and nights out in the woods, mostly in the mountains, out west, and then now here in North Carolina, where I've been for the past 25 years, actually, right after that trip to Okefenokee and Cumberland. We moved our family up here to Celo, to the Arthur Morgan School, and spent many years there. And that school is very much like in the woods, real tiny boarding school and day school that has a farm program and a big outdoor program. And so I worked there for a long time doing a lot of outdoor education as part of my work. And then when I was ready to leave the school about 8 years ago, I decided I wanted to try to start my own business, and that's how Snakeroot Ecotours came about. And so, started out with doing like a lot of wildflower walks and firefly walks. Those are super popular. That's coming up this tomorrow actually is my first one this year. And then, started doing more weekend retreats and mushroom walks, and tried to fill out the season in various ways. And so going to Cumberland, we do this trip in March, and it sort of helps me extend my season here, because really people don't start getting out into the woods a lot in the mountains until about April, when the wildflowers are blooming.
I mean, it's still cold in March. No,
I know, it really is. Yep. Yep.
I like my hot, humid temperatures. I like Cumberland in November and December, when not everybody thinks that it's maybe as pleasant as I really do. But I'm really excited to be able to get, now that my youngest two children are older, I have a big excursion plan to go up and let them have some adventures in the North Carolina mountains. And I can think of nobody better to guide them on that than Snakeroot. I mean, your experience is so wide, and you've really been in a lot of places, but 25 years you've been going to and from Cumberland. So that in and of itself is significant and offers your participants so much value in their experience. I mean, I think that's just a very different experience for visitors and people looking for a guided hike, to go with somebody with the amount of years you've got under your belt, as compared to somebody who maybe doesn't yet. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So what would you describe Snakeroot's guided Cumberland Island trips? What do they typically look like for our listeners?
It's been pretty consistent the last couple of years as far as how it's structured. We spend our first night at Crooked River State Park, and that's so that we can meet the group. And usually the group is about 8 or so participants, and a couple of guides, 2 or 3 guides, depending on on who I've got and what the group's looking like. And they actually have great little primitive sites at Crooked River. It's called the Pioneer Group Campsites. And
I love Crooked River State Park.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We're just, there in the longleaf pines, and just sort of getting, meeting each other, for those of us who don't know each other, and sort of looking at our gear. And, the trips, it really varies. We have people who come who have a lot of experience in the outdoors and backpacking, and some people who this is like kind of like their first time trying it out. And
that could be pretty intimidating.
Yeah, it can be
for someone. Yeah, for sure. So Crooked River sounds like a great little first night for them to kind of get their feet wet, and, to, like you said, get to know each other and meet each other.
Exactly.
And launch off from there. So,
I mean, I can imagine it would be pretty intimidating to like sign up to go into the wilderness with a whole bunch of people you don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the most remarkable thing about these trips is how amazingly the group really gels after a couple of days. And like, that's so something cool. That I think everybody, takes away that they don't really expect to, is how much they appreciate being in that group and getting to know each other in that environment, because
created there. Yeah,
exactly. So it becomes a very tight knit little community group for 5 days.
5 days. That's amazing. Okay. So the first night is at Crooked River, and then you take the ferry.
Right. Exactly. So, that way we don't have, we can sort of like make sure we have all our stuff together and everybody's all ready to get on the ferry and has everything they need, and not bringing anything that they don't need, because you don't want to be
because it gets heavy out there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. People are always
first timers.
Exactly. Yep. There's always people leaving, jeans and books and binoculars and stuff in the car.
Books, that's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I always bring Carol's book, the one she, the natural history of Cumberland Island, to share with people the night before and the morning of, and sort of as a reference guide. But I have not actually hiked with it on the island, because it's definitely over a pound. I think I weighed it. It might be 2 pounds, but
it's a big book.
It is. It's a fantastic resource to have. And someday I want to go and like haul it around on the island and have the time to really like, consult it as I go. But But I've read it beforehand, and other people often have a chance to look at it before they go too. So yeah, we get on, then we get onto the island, and the last couple of years, what we've done is we just stay at Stafford the first night. So it's a relatively short hike, about 4 miles to Stafford. And Stafford's sort of like, it sort of bridges the gap between front country and back country. And you guys know, it's like it's a fantastic location right next to the beach.
And which you don't get at other wilderness campsites on Cumberland.
Exactly.
Or at
exactly.
Campsites.
Yeah.
And you can still have a fire there. So it is sort of developed, right? There's restrooms. Right. Like it sort of eases folks into island life a bit.
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah. So it's perfect for this kind of group. And it's not too long a hike. So then the next day, I think that the next day we go hike the rest of the way up to Brick Hill Bluff, which is really like, most people who have been deep into the wilderness, that's their favorite site, and it's for good reason. I mean,
spectacular.
Right on the marsh. So at Stafford, you get the sunrises on the beach. If you go out to the beach early in the morning and watch the sunrise, and then you go up to Brick Hill, and right there at your campsite, you're getting the sunset over the marsh. And then, in the morning, the sun rises, and it creates that Golden Isles effect when the light's hitting the marsh grasses. And, the morning and the evening is also when all the birds are active right there on the marsh. So you see them coming and going to their roosts and their feeding grounds. And there's often dolphins in that area as well. So that it's a really spectacular sight. Everybody, they hear Brick Hill Bluff, so they're thinking like it's going to be like a little cliff above the water. But for those of you who've been there, it's like you get there and it's like that part of the beach has been eroding quite a bit, actually, that part of the marsh. So there isn't really a bluff right at that campsite, but you're just right there on the water. Sometimes it can be a little bit buggy, like no-see-ums and stuff.
That's like the biggest understatement I've ever heard. You're right.
A little bit buggy.
A little bit buggy. That was so nice of you. But in its defense, in this location's defense, when you get that breeze off the marsh, it's lovely. I mean, really can't compare to the view, but you do have to be prepared for some of the worst bug conditions of your life.
Yeah, that can be true. Although when we go in March, it's usually not too bad. It has everything to do with the breeze and the temperature.
You take your group at exactly the right time of year.
Yeah. So usually by the time dinner rolls around, most people are putting on their head nets because of the no-see-ums.
I'm wearing it before I prepare dinner, but yes.
Yeah.
Just wearing it 24/7.
Basically.
Yeah. And you're praying for the breeze to kick up and, for the temperatures to drop. And actually, once it gets dark, once the sun goes down, they usually go away. I haven't encountered a lot of mosquitoes there the times that we've been there. I'm sure later in the season, there probably are a lot. We go like mid to late March. So
is that the reason why you pick mid to late March, or is there another reason?
Yeah, that's a big reason. Actually, I've been there. I took another Arthur Morgan School group there once in May for a week-long backpacking trip in May. This was actually the first time I ever met Carol. We took a group of kids there. I think it was 2015, and we spent a whole week in the wilderness. And May was something else. Actually, we were really lucky because it had been really dry and there weren't that many mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it rained like a couple days before we left, and all the mosquitoes came out. But before that, the ticks were just insane. It was like we had to create a game out of, like how many ticks you could pick off, and we had a little Ziploc bag that we collected our ticks in. And I mean, we had like hundreds of ticks in there by the end of the trip.
Oh my gosh.
So that's so I learned what it's like in May. It was, otherwise it was really cool because there's lots more, other forms of life out and
lots
about
of wildlife
as well.
activity at that time.
Yeah, like especially reptiles, which is really cool. So because I love reptiles. I used to want to be a herpetologist when I was a kid. So we saw lots of different snakes and we saw some gators and lots of lizard activity. And I mean, it seems like almost every time I go to the island, I see like a snake I've never seen before, like a smooth green snake I'd never seen before until I went to Cumberland. I saw a scarlet king snake. One time with Carol, we got a coach whip, which I'd never seen before. So, and with these school kids, we saw an eastern diamondback, which was really cool.
Oh, that's an experience
honestly,
they won't forget.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, yeah, a couple of them got a little too close to it, but I mean, they were just running through the woods and, ran right by it. And actually, Carol told us later that she thinks that the venomous snakes there are much less likely to bite a person because they're so accustomed to all the horses bumbling around. And so they know that these large awkward mammals are going to be around, and they're not worth wasting their venom on. So,
sure.
So,
yeah. Well, that's pretty surprising that, even after these 15, 20 years of consistently coming to the island like that you still see new species and new little creatures like that. So that's cool.
I mean, that's how rich a place it is. And the other part of that is like learning more, so
right.
I try to learn new birds every time I go. So, cause it's a little earlier in the spring migration there when we go in March. Here we're just, we probably haven't even gotten the first migrating songbirds yet, but when we go down there, the forest is just full of like northern parulas and white-eyed vireos, which we don't even really get up here in the mountains. But so I've like learned these songs that I hadn't really gotten a taste of up here because there's different ones down there. So that's been really fun.
So do you bird by sight or by sound?
Mostly by sound now, which I never thought I was going to be able to do.
That's like real talent.
Yeah, I think it's experience, because really I don't have a talent for it at all. Like I can't learn languages and I can't do music. Like I can't learn music or play music. And so I thought I was doomed, but the kind of, people that come on a lot of my hikes, it attracts, people who are interested in all sorts of things, in particular birders. And so I learned from a lot of people who would come on my hikes.
You're a smart.
That's
guide.
how it started.
You're a smart guide. You soak up everything they can give you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's all about learning. I mean, that's the wondrous thing about being out in the forest is like it's like a bottomless pit as far as what you can learn about it. So
well, this gives me hope because my eyesight is continuing to fade as I get older, and I said that I never should have relied on my vision for bird identification. And so I find myself more inclined to want to learn to identify them by sound. So that's encouraging to me to hear. And so I appreciate you being willing to share.
And do you know Merlin? Do you have Merlin, the app?
No, but Merlin does not always work on the island. And I can tell you this because here's a story for you. Just recently, I was bragging to Carol about how fabulous that Merlin app is. And I'm like, here, let me try it. And like 3 different times successively, I could not get Merlin to connect on the island when we were trying desperately to identify a bird. And so while it is a wonderful application, I can vouch for the fact that it cannot be used everywhere.
Well, okay, yeah, but you can have it downloaded. So
maybe I need to do
like
something.
That's true, Jess. Maybe you're doing it the wrong way.
Hey, user error is a real situation over here. So okay, touche.
Yeah, I mean it does go awry sometimes, like if you don't have your location on or something, but you shouldn't need cell signal for it. Like it should work. Like, cause a lot of the places where I hike, doesn't have any cell service.
Okay. Well, I'm going to troubleshoot. So I'm going to be able to report back that the next time I'm not embarrassed that when I'm relying on technology to identify a bird, it doesn't.
There you go. Yeah. I downloaded the southeastern bird region to it. It's like a full gigabyte, but well worth it. I think that's what you're probably missing, Jess.
Probably.
Because if not, I think it just kind of pulls it from the cloud or the internet.
Yeah, download your bird pack.
Okay, I need to upgrade.
It's really cool.
All right. Got it.
I've definitely been fooled by like mockingbirds and blue jays.
Oh, they're
I was
the
like,
worst.
that's a hawk. Yeah, it was picking up like a red-shouldered hawk, and I was like, no way. And then I see a blue jay fly off, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, they're good at that.
Yeah, they are. They're
the
really
birds are. Merlin's not. Yeah.
So, all right. So you're on day 3. You
Yep.
guys stayed overnight at Brick Hill Bluff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's about 7 miles from Stafford. So, about 4 miles to Stafford, then another 7 or so to Brick Hill. And sometimes, people make little detours to, if they want to see Plum Orchard or something like that. But,
Sure.
But then, so then the middle day, we try to meet up with Carol, and we've usually been able to do that. And she's just wonderful with a group like ours, where we get to go. We meet her at her place, and then she's taken us on some jaunts around her part of the island, specifically on like the very north end, the beach, facing Little Cumberland and towards the north,
Right.
around a terrapin point, and it's just so amazing to spend the day with her and see the island through her eyes, because she's lived there for 50 years doing everything she can to learn all about it. And so it just, it's just, I can't describe how it is to be with somebody like that who can show you, all these details that you wouldn't necessarily have noticed on your own, or fill in the gaps of information that you've been wondering, answering those questions that you've, been asking yourself and others around you for the last couple of days on the island. So,
honestly, just thinking about it from a new backpacker and a new hiker situation that, they chose to go on this tour. From their perspective, you have, kind of stuck your neck out. You're doing something new. This is your first backpacking trip with a bunch of strangers, right? And then you have someone like yourself who has been doing this stuff since childhood and coming to the island for, 15, 20 years. And then you meet up with the Carol Ruckashell on the island, who's lived there for 50 years. And I just imagine, as a new person into like maybe the nature aspect and the hiking aspect of it, just being completely mind blown from, these two individuals and your guides, not to even mention your guides who have been probably doing this for a while.
Yeah.
So that's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it ends up being a real, life-changing experience for a lot of people. Especially those folks who this is kind of a new thing for. And for those who, a lot of, we got people who know about Cumberland, and maybe this has been sort of like on their bucket list to get to Cumberland, and maybe they've read Untamed, Will Harlan's book, and so they know about Carol, and they're really excited to meet her. And it's a real fantastic experience for them.
Right. And I think wilderness has the ability to be so transformative for everyone. And the fact that you make it more accessible to people who maybe wouldn't feel comfortable doing it independently or confidently, is to me just such a gift. And you do it in a way that's affordable and approachable and equitable. And I am so grateful for what you do to get people out and experiencing the wilderness and valuing the wilderness in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate your support.
So we're on day 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have met up with Carol, which from the dock, like, that's how many miles? We've already said 4 to 7.
Yeah, it's probably, and then
7.
10 to Brick Hill, and then it's another couple miles up to Carol's, depending on how you go. Like, if you go the adventurous way on what is it, the Bunk Hill Trail? No, I can't remember what the name of that trail. Bunkley?
Yeah.
Is that it? I don't remember. It's a little trail that goes through sort of the scrubland and the swamp towards the north end, and it tends to be very overgrown and swampy, but it is like a short, it cuts off like a mile or two of the hike to Carol.
But it's easily like 15 miles that they've hiked, Dev, to get up.
Yeah. So, right. And then, usually we do like a 10-mile day just exploring the north end of the island, part of that is with Carol. Like, I mean, she
She doesn't
she
play.
tromps
Yeah.
around. Oh yeah, no, totally. Oh yeah,
No, she does not.
That was definitely something that really always impresses people, is like how she just like puts her boots on and goes out and climbs over all the logs down to the beach and strolls right with us along the beach.
So do you spend most of that day 4 with her?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when we try to get there sometime late morning, sometime 10 or 11 or so, and then she'll usually hang out with us until late in the afternoon, and then say our goodbyes and head
And
back
everybody's
to
worn
Brick Hill.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure. Oh yeah, it's a long day. We get back to Brick Hill and make our dinner and put our head nets on and enjoy the sunset. And yeah, everybody's pretty worn out, so they get in their tents and have a good night's sleep. And then the next day we go back to Stafford to have one last night at Stafford. So our final night is back at Stafford.
Again,
And,
transitioning people back to reality, right? Like
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And then, we, as long as the weather's good in the morning, we go out on all, we make coffee at the campsite, and everybody brings their mugs out to the beach and watches the sunrise, one last time on the beach. And then kind of get back and pack up real quickly and head back to the ferry. So that's kind of the trip, and it's 5 full days, 4 nights on the island, and then the one night before at Crooked River.
And you've had people come
Wow.
from all over the
What
country
a first
for these.
trip.
Yeah, for sure. Like this, let's see, this trip we had, it was pretty much, it was mostly East Coast, but all the way from Massachusetts to Florida, and then we had somebody from Minnesota too on this last year. So it's a nice mix, because we actually end up, because there's people around here that I know who sign up. We usually get a couple, 2 or 3 people, that I already know from my neighborhood, basically here in the mountains, and then a handful. Sometimes they're friends, far-flung friends. Actually, the year before, a local woman here sort of organized a group of her friends to come, and one of them was from Wales.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
she came all the way.
No way.
Yeah, she came all the way from the British Isles.
That's amazing.
For this. So yeah.
Just
So
goes
you
to
you
show
have
how globally significant Cumberland is.
Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah, it's a special place. Yeah.
So you have all of these people, coming from different states and different regions. Some could be experienced, but you said earlier that most of them don't have a whole lot of experience. So how do you kind of tailor these experiences on the island and the hikes to accommodate those audiences with,
Mhm.
different levels of interest or knowledge about wilderness, or even just Cumberland as an island?
Right.
So does that change, or have you found like the right groove that kind of benefits everyone?
It seems to just work for everyone. And I do spend a great deal of time, beforehand, trying to make it really clear, like what people should expect if they haven't done something like this before. And so I have a little, I have it kind of written out, like a little written summary of like what it's like, to be on a trip like this. And sort of the bottom line is, the ability to hike these distances with a pack. So a lot of the times, when we're carrying the pack, it's going to be like 25 to 30 pounds sometimes. We try to keep them as light as possible. So I think for a lot of the participants are able to start the trip around 30 or maybe less, and then you lose a little bit of weight as you go and you eat your food. So everybody's carrying about 5 pounds of group food.
Oh yeah.
So a really lightweight packer can maybe finish the trip with under 20 pounds, but typically it's 20 to 30 pounds for up to 10 miles a day. I mean, we don't actually have a 10-mile day with our packs on, but because we do that middle day, where we're not carrying our loads.
Right.
But 7 miles with a pack, and fortunately, the thing about people who are used to hiking in the mountains or something, it's real different because it's all totally flat there. So
My favorite part.
that takes out, so that takes out a whole element of challenge that makes it a little more accessible for more people. I mean, we've had it's amazing. Like, actually, each of the last 2 years, we've had every decade represented from 20s to 70s.
That's badass.
On the trip.
On the same trip?
Super cool. Yeah.
That is
so
awesome.
That's
really,
that is badass.
A really great spread. Yeah, we've had every year. I think we've had people in their 70s come on this
Devin,
trip.
can we send you next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I'd honestly love to go on your North Carolina trips too.
For sure. Definitely.
My wife is kind of from that area. I'm originally from Middle Tennessee, but
Okay.
Gatlinburg and the Blue Ridge Mountains weren't too far away from us. It was about a 4-hour drive, so we were up there a lot.
Yeah.
My wife is from, if you know where Cherryville, North Carolina is.
I do.
Yeah, she's from that area, so she kind of had the foothills of the mountains in her backyard. So throughout my entire life, it's always been kind of tying me back to the foothills and the Blue Ridge Mountains and everything. It's just unbeatable in my opinion, just from how beautiful it is and the historical aspect of it and everything. So I would definitely love to do the Cumberland trip as well as some North Carolina trips, but we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah, for sure. And everything else I do is in the mountains here, like locally. This is the Cumberland trip is the only time I leave the mountains.
The only time he ventures out, Devin.
Yeah. I mean, I do personal trips with my family, and we actually have often in the past gone to Cumberland for some of those, but yeah, the only time I do professional trip leading off of the mountain is at Cumberland.
Yeah. So you have these new people, these fresh faces come out to hike with you. What's kind of the number one thing that people overpack on, or maybe even underpack, if that's a thing for backpacking?
Yeah, well, we try to do a pretty good job of making sure they don't end up overpacking.
Is this along with the expectations that you kind of set? You do,
yeah.
And I'm realizing that.
So I do, like those expectations that I send out. It has all that, it has all the packing stuff in there, all the packing information. And for a lot of people, they're like, I get a lot of questions in the weeks leading up to it, and we have a little Zoom meeting. Jess has been on some of those. So where it's like we get to meet each other, for those of us who haven't actually met each other before, and sort of a Q&A. Largely, by the end, it ends up being sort of answering some gear questions and stuff like that. But so we try to make sure people aren't really doing a lot of overpacking. People have been, like, sometimes we do run into some like pretty chilly nights on the island, and I have learned that as I've aged, it's harder to stay warm. So I prepare myself for that. But I've definitely had people, on the older end of that spectrum who have definitely been pretty chilly. And it wasn't that they underpacked. I think it was just like hard to stay warm when it's like the nights go into the 30s.
The fluctuation is real.
You're not used to sleeping.
Yeah.
You're not used to sleeping.
The days are in like the 70s and everything.
Exactly.
Was there anything?
Like, how do you dress for that?
Is there anything you've like ever forgotten that was like really important, or I mean, because I feel like that's happened to all of us at some point.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
so
no matter how prepared that you get, there's always something that creeps up.
Well, I was wondering if I was going to get the opportunity to tell this story.
Okay,
but,
great. I'm here for
So remember I told you about the very first time I took a group of students onto the island. This would have been March of 2009. So this is the first time I actually led first time I backpacked on the island. And it wasn't real backpacking. It was part of this much longer trip that we were going through all of coastal Florida, studying coastal ecology. And we decided to spend 2 nights on Cumberland towards the end of the trip. So, so we were spending one night at Stafford and then one night at Sea Camp. And we got to the ferry, and here we are, like it's me and a couple of other staff members, and then I think we had like 8 or 9 kids, and we're kind of like rushing to pack everything up for the ferry, and we hadn't done a good job of delegating like who was supposed to be packing what, and we get onto the island, and fairly soon, I don't know if we got to Stafford or not before we realized, but we only had about half the food that we had intended to bring.
Oh no.
Oh,
And we
gosh.
didn't have the tents.
Oh my god.
So yeah, this is like
the two most important things.
Oh, this is a fantastic learning experience. So I mean, we were very, very fortunate that the weather was perfect.
Holy
I mean, it
moly.
was
Yes,
like,
you were.
you know, probably, yeah, like not a drop of rain, not even, you know, barely any clouds for a couple of days.
Magical.
So it was, you know, warm during the day, maybe like 50s at night or something. And people were quite happy to just like, you know, sleep on the ground in their sleeping bags. And we like rationed the food very carefully. You know, we found some things on the beach that we ate.
Sure.
And by
that's roughing it, right?
Yeah. But you know, they loved it. This was quite an experience for these kids. You know, the fun part was telling their parents
Oh my
later,
God.
I think. You know.
Yeah. Hey, everything's fine, but this is what we ran into.
Yeah, this is kind of like early, you know, I don't think we all had cell phones at the time, so there wasn't a lot of
This was way back when.
that kind of communication. But when
Right.
after we got off, yeah, but where we live in the woods here, we didn't get cell service until like probably 2013 or something. So not a lot of people had cell phones here. So, but we made it. You know, we were kind of hungry by the end, and I think one of the staff members took some kids around Sea Camp on the last morning and sort of like, you know, mooched kind of like raccoon style.
I'm
like
familiar
went
with those
around to the different campsites and yeah. So we split a couple of granola bars and an orange or something for breakfast that morning, and then we went and had a big meal on the mainland. So
yeah. So with the expectations, there was a method to that. You went without one trip, and you were like, never again.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was a great lesson in being prepared, because you know it's a big deal to get. You know, it's one thing to go backpacking somewhere where you know you're a few miles from a road, and if something goes awry, you can just like hike out and get help or whatever. But when you're on the island, you know, you're on the island, and ferry only comes, you know, once or twice a day, and sometimes, and when we've gone in the winter,
not even every
family,
day,
you know, we'll go. Exactly. So you're there, and we've been there over Christmas, which is really cool, and you know, because not that many people spend Christmas on the island. Yeah,
give away the secret.
So, but you know, and there might be 2 or 3 days in a row where there's no ferries. So, yeah,
Jess has been there a few times.
Yep.
Once
we were there, and there was a government shutdown, and we actually got ushered off of the island, which was sad. It was like I think it must have been right before Christmas or something, and it was a few years ago. And actually, Will Harlan was there too. We saw him and his family, and
so cool.
And yeah, we got basically they warned us that it might happen when we got onto the island, and then like the next day they came around in a van and rounded everybody up.
I think I was hiding in the woods.
Drove into the wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah, Jess definitely hit out in some palmettos.
Did you? Yeah.
I want to go with you.
At least they didn't leave you.
This sounds so fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm an overpacker. Going back to the question of like forgetting stuff, I am definitely an overpacker. I think the first time that I backpacked the island, I had like 4 changes of clothes or something like that, and I didn't change out of my clothes that I arrived on the island with. I know I was a little over prepared on that one, so I've drastically cut my clothes in half, and I'm pretty much set on some other things. But.
Well, you're still young too, so it probably doesn't. Carrying that weight doesn't bother you as much. That's the one thing I've learned as I backpack longer and longer. As I've gotten older, it's just like become more and more important for me to keep the weight off of my back. So, you know, anything I can do to shed a few pounds or ounces even helps.
clearly you've been doing this a while. Are there any sort of like sustainable or like eco-friendly measures that you go the extra distance to follow, or kind of some processes that you've developed?
Yeah, definitely. Just being, well, leave no trace is certainly a big part of like what we teach and what we practice when we're out there in the wilderness. Um, so they, and that's something that we talked about before the trip, and because the other things I warn people about as far as what makes this different than say day hiking or something like that is that you're carrying your weight, and you're also you're carrying everything you need in your pack, and then you're also needing to sleep on the ground, mediated by some kind of sleeping bag, and you'll be pooping in the woods. So, except for when you're at Stafford, you're, if you haven't done it before, you're learning how to dig a cat hole and dispose of your waste properly. So there's that aspect for sure. And of course, the fact that you are packing out everything that you pack in on the island. They don't even have trash cans at sea camp, right, or at the dock. So I think that's kind of a really cool thing about backpacking in general, is that like you're bringing everything you need and you're taking everything back out with you. So it's like this kind of like, yes, like very self-sufficiency, like to this extra degree, and leave no trace is just very integral to that. So there's certainly that aspect of it. As far as like our meals and stuff, we prepare very simple meals and pack food. Like I buy a lot of stuff from bulk, like bulk foods, and then package them up and bring them. And you end up with a bunch of plastic bags. Like I actually probably use more plastic bags for a trip like this than I do in most of the rest of my life for the rest of the year. But when you compare that to like all the stuff that you would be using and wasting and all the energy you'd be consuming when you're not, when most people are sort of living their daily lives, it's probably a relatively small thing, but
it just feels like a lot because you're carrying it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're sort of seeing it every day, but you're feeding like 10 or 11 people a lot of times out of these food rations. So really in the long run, it doesn't. When we come back out and we like throw our trash away, it actually isn't that much. It's like a couple of Ziploc bags of very compact Ziploc bags of trash that we've created over the course of most of a week. So probably less than what most people would do at home. But a lot of it, I mean, as far as the sort of sustainability aspect is just like being in the wilderness in that way. There's just no, the only way to sort of learn that is to just have that experience and to be in the forest. Because for me, a lot of it is, I mean, I know a lot of people love the beach, and I love the beach too. And I love the fact that there's this like 18 miles of pristine beach. And then, but even better than that, there's like these untouched dunes, a dune system, like an intact dune system that is extremely rare for the East Coast. For almost any part of the developed world, it's extremely rare now, because that's where you go to another island in South Carolina or Georgia or Florida or whatever, and the dunes, that's where the houses are. So it's like they built up all that shoreline. And on Cumberland, there's this fantastic intact dune system that you have to hike like sometimes a quarter or half a mile through the dunes in order to get to the beach, and you realize that this is like the way it's supposed to be. And then on the other side of the dunes, you have a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles of maritime forest that is ecosystem that you really can't see in that kind of extent anywhere else. probably in the whole world as far as like that specific type of southeastern maritime live oak maritime forest. There's really nothing like it. Right behind the dunes, you have like the live oaks are like super horizontal and gnarly. I mean, all the great pictures that you see of live oaks from the island are usually taken from those ones that are right behind the dunes where they get windswept, and it takes them hundreds of years to grow these like super long gnarly limbs, and the canopy might only be like 20 feet off the ground. And then as you get further inland, the canopy grows a little bit and it gets to be 30, sometimes 40 feet up. But they're still like these enormous live oaks that are just draped in Spanish moss and full of the song of, like I said, northern parulas and the white-eyed vireos and other warblers, and then the palmettos underneath. It just makes for such a magical ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely mind blowing there. Have you observed any type of like concerns related to the conditions of the actual wilderness over your years? What have you seen kind of change? I know you mentioned the erosion of like the Bunker Hill bank and everything like that. So what kind of things have you seen in that regard?
Yeah. So as far as like the erosion on that part of the island, like at Brick Hill Bluff and such, I mean, that's probably the majority of that is going to be due to just natural shifts in these barrier islands are temporary. Even though they might have been around for thousands of years, they're constantly shifting and changing and stuff. And, sand might be piling up on one side and eroding on the other, just depending on the currents of each particular island. And so most of that is probably natural, although certainly now sea level rise is a real thing, and we've only just started seeing the beginning of that, honestly. I mean, who knows what it's going to be like in another 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But that's where the biggest changes, I think, as far as sea level rise is, that we're going to see in those kind of environments. But most of that change at this point is probably natural. I feel fortunate in that I haven't really, I don't have the 50 years that Carol has of living there and seeing it. But for the most part, the wilderness to me seems like pretty solid. I mean, it's very, very unfortunate that the road and the main road and the beach were cut out of the wilderness, because it's always sort of a little heart-wrenching to have vehicles drive even just on the road, and then especially on the beach, like where they just don't belong, in that northern part of the island. So that's certainly unfortunate, but that's been the case ever since I've been going. I didn't really experience it, at least not in that northern wilderness part, before, while I guess there was a time that the road was still part of the wilderness.
Yeah, it didn't get removed from the wilderness until 2002.
So, yeah.
Or 4, one or the other. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't really get up into that part of the island during that time that it would have been in the wilderness. So that would have been cool to experience. Because we try to avoid hiking on the main road because of that. Like you don't want to be like seeing a vehicle while you're in the backcountry. But at the same time, in order to get to Brick Hill and stuff, you sort of have to hike on the main road a little bit at least, and it's kind of fun to look for shark's teeth there, really, honestly, because they dredge up the sand, yeah, and then they dump it on the main road, and that's where all the good shark's teeth are. So that's kind of fun, but we only spend a mile or two on it each week, and then I have definitely noticed, like when they put in, I remember when they were digging lines, some kind of utility lines along the side of the road. That was pretty upsetting because they did a bunch of mowing and cutting, like mechanical cutting along the side of the road there. That, right. It's one thing to have, yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing to have this like narrow road, and then it's another to like then sort of mow or cut on the sides of it, which happened in some places. And they've, I remember years when they were using machinery to clear trails, but most of the time that we've taken those trails into the, the backcountry and the northern part of the island, it was definitely hadn't been cleared by machines. In fact, a lot of times hadn't even been cleared by, people in months or whatever, because stuff grows there so fast. They get overgrown really quickly.
Yeah. And in your observation of the island, you're there for, 5 days
Right.
once a year in the same part of year. So it could be a little difficult to kind of remember and see those changes.
Yeah, it's very limited, like compared to somebody like Carol who sees that day in and day out.
Or Jess, who's
their
down
lifetime. Yeah.
Right, Jess. Yeah, you give some great stories about the hiking and your trips and everything. I just got a few more questions, if I may.
Sure.
So, you talked about like your first time leading a group on the island and forgetting those things and stuff like that. Would you consider that like one of your more challenging experiences on the island, or have you had anything like weather related or kind of like personal circumstances that you've had on the island?
Yeah, that was definitely the most challenging.
So you went ahead and got that out of the way on your first trip.
Yeah, right? For sure. Yeah. And then, we've been pretty fortunate with weather in these trips that I've been leading the last few years. The first year we did it, we had, it pretty much rained solid the first day. And we were hiking all the way to Yankee. So we had this like 7 or 8 mile slog through the rain. That's never a fun way to start a trip, but honestly, like it was beautiful weather after that. And it's, I always tell people like the chances are it's going to rain while we're on the island. Like it's hopefully not going to rain like every day. Like that would be very unlikely and unfortunate. But it's not going to be like perfect weather either. So like if you're on the island for 5 days, chances are you're going to encounter some kind of weather. So, but nothing like too dangerous or anything like that, chilly nights and wet days sometimes, but
right. Yeah. Not to brag, Jess and I though have endured gale force winds on the island before.
Wow.
It was quite an experience.
I bet.
It was a memorable one though. It's one that I look back on and kind of appreciate, because my tent held, like I slept like a baby through the wind, and I don't know. It's different though when that wind's ripping through all the saw palmettos and the trees and everything. And you're hearing the ocean as well contribute to that. So,
what time of year was that?
This was probably early November, right, Jess?
Yes. If you go at that time of year, you really do run the risk of still some hurricane force winds, and so it always promises to be a memorable trip at that time of year. I can assure you of that.
What do you appreciate most about your experience with hiking and leading these people on this opportunity on the island? So what do you appreciate most about that entire experience? And that could be about the island or just getting new people out into the wilderness, whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think the couple of things that I appreciate, I mean, one is just from my own sake, my own self, just being out there.
Sure.
Anytime that you get to spend that much time in the woods consecutively, and for me, what's a kind of a new and different environment down in the Maritime Forest or on the coast is a really cool experience, and all the stuff that you get to learn and observe and notice for the first time or notice again from other times. And then
right.
But for these group trips, it's really huge to be able to provide that for other people and to sort of see it fresh through their eyes. Cause they're having this really magical experience that you also are getting to, experience sort of vicariously through them, because, if you've been there a bunch of times, it's awfully cool, but it's even cooler to like be experiencing that with people with sort of fresh eyes. And it's kind of the inverse of like what you experience by hanging out with Carol, where you're seeing it like through her eyes, her very experienced eyes. So, yes. And then, like I said before, that it's always a real pleasant surprise just how well these groups sort of gel, and how, sort of deeply appreciative everybody becomes of each other, and, having to sort of work as a team to live in the wilderness for a few days. It really makes for a great group experience.
Yeah. And Cumberland kind of, it does that for people too with their relationships. And I don't know, it's a place where you feel free, and, you get to connect with the other people. It's just a great way to experience that. So,
yeah, for sure.
And we appreciate you just, getting new people out into nature and backpacking, specifically on Cumberland Island, but also in the North Carolina mountains and everything. It's truly something that kind of takes us back to our roots and our soul, if you believe in that. It's very fulfilling. Of course, we know how valuable your time is as a listener, so thanks for always choosing to spend some of it with us. And sorry that Jess isn't here to say it, but I'll take my first one. Stay wild. The Wild Cumberland Podcast is produced by Vertical River, and this episode was edited by Greg Cuson.
Wild Cumberland is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and all donations are tax deductible. Learn more and take action at wildcumberland.org.